Our Ambassador-in-Chief for the public sector in the United States, Paul Smith, and our other ambassadors around the room here from Red Hat. On their behalf, I'd just like to welcome all of you. I was going through the agenda. It's just a very exciting agenda, and it exemplifies, really, the coming together of people who make open source happen. And it exemplifies the spirit of sharing, the democracy of ideas coming together, and the meritocracy of the best ideas winning. That's what open source is all about. And thanks to you and to the people around the world who make it happen. And in the short 15 or so minutes that I had with you, I wanted to tee up really just two themes to set the stage, at least from a Red Hat perspective. Red Hat as a catalyst of this entire movement on what we see happening. One theme is around it's time for open source and it's getting mainstream. We'll talk a little bit about that. And the second is around why open source is most important at the infrastructure layer. And I just want to share with you a little bit about what we are doing to drive that agenda very, very aggressively. You'll be hearing some announcements later this afternoon with some of our partners. I think later this morning, you'll be hearing some announcements from Cisco and Red Hat coming together. I think there's a speaker from Cisco this afternoon. I won't steal his thunder, but we're very excited about the happening in that part of the ecosystem as well. So with that, actually, I will use a slide or two, and as a video equivalent to what I'm saying. Can we put up the first line, or am I supposed to do it? So let me speak a little bit about two drivers. I'm actually maybe better without slides, but if you can put them up, are they up? This is a problem. When you have 15 minutes and you spend 2 minutes trying to figure out what slide is where. So two drivers, if you can get them up, great. If not, no worries. Two drivers that are really shaping the industry. One that we're experiencing every day. It is this incredible explosion of information, this next generation of the information age, which is happening at an accelerating pace, this anywhere, anytime computing phenomena, and the enormous load it is putting on the infrastructure in terms of things that can be connected, but more importantly, things that should be connected but are not connected yet. I was reading somewhere that of all the possibilities of things to connect, man to machine, machine to machine, process to process, of all the communication agendas that would be useful in driving the next level of utility in computing, there is less than a few percent that is connected today. So the best is yet to come, and it is coming at an accelerating pace as we go forward. Now, the second part of this agenda, and that's something we all know well, we all experience, the second part of this agenda is to drive the inherent complexity of linking all these things that still need to be connected. CIOs, senior practitioners, industry leaders, be it public sector or private sector, are looking at what they need to do to be able to pull all this together. And they're looking first at the infrastructure. They're looking at the infrastructure to see how do they open it up to enable this anywhere, anytime, composite services that are interacting with each other, composite applications, composite services interacting with each other to produce meaningful data. And the first realization that dawns on them is that it is critical to have architectural freedom in this context. The option is architectural freedom to drive this interoperability, which is critical to this forward-looking agenda, and the opposite of that is a non-starter. Hence, everything you and we as Catalysts are doing to drive the open source agenda. And even as people look at the infrastructure to see what needs to be done to open it up, to really commoditize it, to make it more affordable, to make it more available, to make it much more like a utility, it's important to look back at the principles of what history has shown us over the years. right from the first, maybe the second phase of the Industrial Revolution, the only way to make mass consumption possible was to enable the means of mass production. We saw this with automotives, we saw this with electricity, we saw this with everything that ultimately became a utility. And we're going to see the exact same thing happen with information services as we go forward. And the only way to achieve that paradigm is to open it up, make it even commoditized in a good sense, with value, so that people like you, people like me, people all over the world can consume information and make it as part of the fabric, enabling fabric of our lives. So we're all very excited to have you here. We're all very excited for you to become a part of this sharing and connection to make all this happen. And importantly, as we look forward in driving at least what is a business for us at the infrastructure layer, it's also important to realize that it's not that we're opening up the infrastructure as an end in itself. Really, the infrastructure decisions you make today will last for many, many years. And our premise, the premise for our business is that the infrastructure decisions you make today will drive the innovation models you build on it tomorrow. And to the extent those innovation models need to be agile and open and service-centric and enabling, if the infrastructure underneath it is closed, then it will inhibit the infrastructure or the innovation models that sit on top of it. It is that simple logic that for us is driving our strategy and making all the bets that we have made as a company with you, with the community, both the upstream community as well as the downstream community. I see the slide is up. If you could skip to, I don't know which slide it is, but if you could go forward one more. Okay, I think I made that point. This slide. It's a busy slide, but I just want to don't worry too much about the slide. I'll just wanted to back up some of my words with what we're trying to do to enable this next generation infrastructure. So keeping in mind the context that I just spoke about, a mile high and an inch deep, keeping in mind that context, I'll again describe our strategy to you, the bets we have made as a company in our short history and in our accelerating history in terms of the rate of change we are driving with you, with the open source community, both upstream in terms of the development efforts that happen with the public sector, with the private sector, and also downstream in terms of the work that gets implemented to produce real value for customers. That work that we're driving focuses around some key bets that we have made as a company. The first bet was around Linux, which now today is mainstream. The whole world, the enterprise world, will at some point be on an open platform like Linux. It's already taken off. The next bet we made was the service creation layer around JBoss. We bought this company and we have made it open. And there's a lot of work going on in upstream in terms of the service creation layer, service integration layer, service delivery layer. Thanks to our healthy balance sheet and the free cash flow that we generate, we've been able to acquire some companies and make it a very robust portfolio. We made a bet around virtualization. We thought the world needed, we think, and you think, that the world needed an alternative to a proprietary virtualization platform, as good as that may be. And we introduced KVM-based open virtualization, Red Hat virtualization. The next big bet we're making today, not today, but in the last couple of years with these acquisitions we've made and continued investments we continue to make, is that practitioners are looking to become much more application-centric. Practitioners like you are looking to become much more service-centric. Practitioners like you are looking at the infrastructure and the inherent complexity that goes with it, even as the infrastructure starts to, at least in the compute layer, tap the boundaries of Moore's law with the physics of density, and you start to overcome that with clustering and parallelism. And with all that complexity, practitioners are looking to say, how do we abstract all that stuff into a layer of manageability where we can manage the infrastructure in a much more application-driven, service-driven, business services-driven context and manage that infrastructure in a way that goes across private or goes across physical, going back a bit, physical, virtual, private clouds, public clouds, hybrid clouds, and orchestrate workloads across this agenda. This is the big bet we're making right now, and you, our customers, our R&D, our reinforcement, our affirmation comes from this mass collaboration of the open source community. You are telling us that it is time for the world to have an agenda around something like OpenStack. The idea of converged resource management, the idea of converged resource management in an open way so that we are not locked in as we drive this inherently complex infrastructure getting more complex to meet the real agenda about service centricity. So we made a big bet around OpenStack. We've also made a big bet that the world does not want to have an OpenStack with proprietary extensions to it, much like happened with the fragmentation of Unix and still remains fragmented, much like happened with the early stages fragmentation of Linux until people like us came along and started to standardize it in an open way. The same agenda is going to be driven around manageability because the world needs a consolidation point for a pure play OpenStack. So hence our next big bet around where we drive our company and where we as catalysts, as people who make huge contributions to what happens upstream, but still are modest about the fact that we remain a catalyst of this entire ecosystem, not the leader, but the challenger of the old and sort of a catalyst of the new. Our bets going forward are going to be helped by you and this collaboration that we're having here in driving an agenda that is service-centric at the service creation layer with the work we're doing with middleware, and also manageability around this hybrid infrastructure, which is much more open than it has been historically. That is Red Hat. That is the bet that we're making. My time's up. It was great to spend just a few minutes with you. And I'm looking forward to our next speaker, which I'm sure you're going to make the introduction. So I'll let you do that. So thanks for joining us.